Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Catalyze Yourself. I'm Gayatri, your host, and today we move into episode 20 of season 3 when control replaces honesty. All throughout this season, we have been seeing something consistently. When we are under pressure and we are not consciously present, conditioned patterns we have learned somewhere along the course of our lives can begin shaping how we move through life. And these patterns do not belong to a particular kind of person, and they do not always appear in obvious ways. They can become part of how we think, how we respond, and how we relate to our own body and how we understand who we are while feeling completely reasonable to us. And today we are staying with another pattern that can feel reasonable to the person who is living it. We are staying with control. When we hear the word control, chances are we tend to think of someone with the power or authority determining the choices of another person. We think of choices being limited, conversations being directed, decisions being made without genuine consideration of another person, or one person deciding what another person is even allowed to feel, say, question, or refuse. This is the form of control we usually recognize first because its effect reaches another person. Someone else's range of possibilities and options become narrower. Someone else's freedom to choose, to respond, to disagree, or remain connected to their own experiences begin to depend on what the person holding more power is willing to allow or accept. And when it comes to control, however, there is another way it can be expressed. And that is something we also need to spend some time understanding. This is where the person who's impacted by the control is us. And the person who's doing the controlling is also us. We may not describe it as control when we decide what we are allowed to feel. We may not call it control when our body communicates exhaustion and we decide to ignore it. We may not call it control when we shut down or reduce our needs before it can become visible to others or anyone else has the opportunity to respond to it. We may not call it control when we prepare to say something honest and then remove every part of the truth that could make us feel exposed, vulnerable, misunderstood, dependent, emotional, or in any way less than the version of ourselves we want others to know. When control is directed inwards into our inner world, it does not necessarily feel as though something is being imposed on us. It can feel like discipline, maturity, composure, responsibility, and knowing ourselves well enough to manage what is happening inside of us. And the trickiest part is that, along with the feeling of reasonableness, it can also feel like honesty. This is where the pattern can become especially difficult for us to recognize. We may believe that we are being honest because what we are choosing or expressing feels like the right choice. We may be speaking directly and calmly. We may be sincere and believe every word that we are saying, and still, control may have already shaped what we chose before we ever spoke. Control may have determined which emotions were reasonable enough to acknowledge, which needs were acceptable enough to call out, which bodily signals were credible enough to influence us, and which part of our experience was too disruptive to be included in what comes to be accepted as our truth. So today, we are slowing down to look at how control can act like honesty without really being honesty. And we can start with the recognition that control is learned. The choices through which it is expressed, whether externally or internally, can become familiar because they helped us manage pressure somewhere along the way. Tightly managing what is happening within us or around us may feel more familiar than remaining present with something uncertain, uncomfortable, emotionally complex, or capable of changing how we see ourselves. And this does not mean that internally directed control causes externally directed control, or that both expressions of control always appear together. Control may be directed outwards only, control may be directed inwards only, or in other cases, in both directions within the same experience, depending on the unique conditioning of what that person has learned throughout their lifetime. What remains consistent is the attempt to narrow what can happen, what can be felt, and what can be acknowledged, or what can be allowed to influence the outcome. When we look into control as power directed towards the external world, most of us will agree that we recognize it easily as one person or a group imposing its effect on another. A scenario that can resonate with many of us could be a conversation where we may be invited to share our perspective, give our feedback, express concern, or say what we genuinely think. Yet, as soon as our response comes out, outside of what the other person expected or preferred, the entire atmosphere of that space begins to change. Our words may be corrected. Our meaning may be reinterpreted for us. Our concern may be reduced to a misunderstanding. Our emotional response may be treated as evidence that we are not seeing the situation clearly. And in the end, the invitation to speak was present, yes, but the freedom for what we said to influence the outcome was not. And from the outside, it can still appear that a choice was freely made, while internally, the range within which we could choose may have already become narrower because of the power of another person. Even if we were told that honesty is welcome, the response to our honesty teaches us which truths can be spoken without consequence or a negative consequence. Exerting control towards the external world can also occur subconsciously for someone who is not consciously present in those choices. In other words, there can be scenarios where someone is intentionally exerting control to the outside world, very much aware of what they're doing. And then there are times when they're not even aware because they are so not present, consciously present in their life. Someone may ask us to say what we think and sincerely believe they're creating space for an honest conversation. Yet, when we share challenges on how they see themselves, their intention, or decision that they may have already made, they may begin explaining why our understanding is incomplete. They may tell us what they intended. They may give us facts that are accurate that can counter ours. They may explain the context we did not have. They may sincerely believe that they are clarifying what happened. Their intention can be exactly as they describe it. And our experience can also be exactly as we describe it. Control begins to enter when only one of those truths is permitted to make a difference. We may say that affected me, and the other person may respond, that was not what I meant. And both statements can be true. The presence of control is not revealed simply because the two accounts are different. It begins to show itself when one person's intention is given the authority to cancel the other person's experience. The person holding more influence may understand or believe what they're doing is honest. They may believe they're being direct, transparent, or willing to say what others will not say. They may be speaking from facts and expressing what they genuinely believe. And still, if their positioning is determined in advance what other person's experiences are allowed to mean, honesty is no longer opening that conversation to a fuller, integrated understanding. It is being used to keep the understanding controlled within a range that is acceptable. And control in these forms does not always look forceful. It can sound measured, it can appear thoughtful, it can be delivered through careful reasoning, it can be presented as protection, care, leadership, experience, accountability, or simply knowing what is best. The person who is controlling may sincerely believe they're helping. They may believe they're preventing harm, preserving stability, protecting a relationship, or guiding a situation towards the most responsible outcome. Within the person holding the greater influence, several experiences may be present together. Their cognitive reasoning and thinking may be gathering reasons for the position that they want to control and hold. Their emotions may carry concern, fear, shame, frustration, or the pressure of responsibility that makes it reasonable for them to have that control. Their nervous system may seek the predictability of a known outcome and what they feel prepared to hold. And from inside of that experience, insistence can feel like clarity, like confidence. Correction can feel like responsibility. Preventing an unwanted outcome can feel like their own self-care. And narrowing that conversation to that controlled space can feel like honesty. Control directed towards the external world in this way can be so subtle. It can operate through an authority of a role, access to resources, expertise, age, emotional closeness, financial dependence, or one's greater willingness to withdraw a connection when they do not receive the response they want. The person holding the power may never have to issue a direct command. Their disappointment, their silence, their withdrawal, or ability to define what is reasonable may be enough to influence the range available to everyone else in their environment. And this in no way means that every expression of authority is control. Leadership requires decisions. Parenting and caregiving carry responsibilities that cannot always be shared equally. Boundaries can limit access while protecting dignity, capacity, safety, and truth. Structure can provide clarity. Expertise can guide us through situations where we do not have the same information or experience. A leader can decide and remain honest that the decision is theirs to make. They can still allow another person's response to be respected and remain valid and real. A parent or caregiver can hold a necessary limit without deciding that disappointment, frustration, or disagreement is unacceptable. A boundary can limit what we are available for without controlling what another person is allowed to think or feel about that limit. Expertise can guide a conversation while remaining open to other information that may change the understanding of it. The presence of direction, limitation, or unequal power is not enough by itself to tell us if control is operating. What begins to reveal control is the relationship with another person's ability to make a difference. Can their perspective genuinely influence what happens? Can their response remain different without being corrected until it becomes acceptable? Can their emotional experience exist without being used as evidence that their perspective is less credible? Can their account of what happened remain part of the conversation even when it is uncomfortable or inconsistent with how someone else wants that situation to be understood or seen? When those possibilities begin narrowing, power is no longer simply supporting the relationship or guiding the scenario. It is beginning to determine the range within which another person is allowed to participate. And this is also where externally directed control can act like honesty. Yet when honesty leaves no room for another person's experience to influence our understanding, control has already shaped what that honesty stands for. And when the pattern is directed internally, our honesty is being overridden by control of our own self. And from the outside, we may appear composed. And in the inside of us, in our inner world, that composure we are showing may require us to continuously manage it and think about the effort that it takes. And because the instructions are coming from within our own internal world, the experience does not necessarily feel as though we are being controlled. No one may be requiring us to appear calm and certain and capable and unaffected or fully resolved. We may be giving those instructions to ourselves so automatically, so within our subconscious, that they feel like part of who we are. Our cognitive processing may determine what is reasonable enough before emotion has had enough space for its signals to be understood. Our body may continue carrying tension and stress and fatigue and discomfort, even after our thinking has established that the matter is settled. All of this can be happening within the exact same experience. There's complete incongruence within our internal world, not aligned, not coherent, not integrated. Internal control can be difficult to recognize because it is often using qualities of strengths that we may be inspired by or we genuinely value. Our ability to think carefully can become the way we move past emotion before understanding it. Our discipline can become the way we require our body to continue without allowing capacity into the determination at all. Our independence can become the way we prevent failure because the possibility of unreliability of others is not even acceptable. Our responsibility can become the way we decide that our own experience must remain secondary to what still must be handled. And none of these strengths are inherently forms of control, and the visible behavior alone does not tell us what is happening within our internal world. Two people may remain calm in a difficult conversation. One may have acknowledged the signal of that emotion, understood what it is trying to communicate, and may have consciously chosen in how they're going to respond to it into the external world. The other may have decided that the emotion was unacceptable before it even came into the space to be understood. The calmness may look identical. Internally, the relationship with that emotion is very different. In one experience, emotion remained part of the processing of the information within our mind. Cognition, emotion, and consciousness were able to contribute, while the nervous system and body remained included in how the response was chosen. And in the other, calmness may have been achieved by determining in advance that the emotion could not influence what was said or done. And that distinction can only be found in what we allowed ourselves to know before we acted. And this is why control directed inwards cannot be recognized only through our choices and what we do. It is present in the conditions we place around what may be felt by us, acknowledged by us, considered by us, or allowed to influence us. And what we allow ourselves to know internally also shapes what becomes available when we relate to the external world. If hurt is controlled before it is understood, we may enter a conversation with a clear and reasonable account that excludes how deeply we were affected. If uncertainty is controlled before it is acknowledged, we may present certainty externally and experience another person's different understanding as something that needs to be controlled. If our needs are controlled before any of them even become visible, we may tell another person that we require nothing from them, while our nervous system and body continue carrying the impact of that unmet need. And this does not mean that internally directed control inevitably becomes externally directed control. It means that the honesty we express externally can only include what we have permitted ourselves to acknowledge internally. And what we allow ourselves to acknowledge can reasonably be what we sincerely believe. And what we sincerely believe, we can in turn think is our honesty. And this is how control can act like honesty without truly being honesty. It can create a limited account that feels complete because the information left outside it was never given the space to become part of what we consciously know. We may be telling the most honest version available to us after our inner experience has already been controlled. When we place this internal experience beside the way control is associated with power in the external world, another pattern can become visible. We usually recognize power through what it allows one person to determine for another. Internally, power can begin to carry a very similar meaning. We may experience our ability to determine what happens within us as evidence that we are strong and remain in charge of ourselves. We may believe we are strong because we can contain emotion. We may understand ourselves as disciplined because we can make our body continue regardless of exhaustion. We may experience ourselves as independent because we can remove the need for support from the situation. We may see ourselves as rational because we can prevent what we feel from influencing what we decide. Each of these qualities can represent real strengths. Composure, discipline, independence, and rational thinking can all support how we move through our life. What we are staying with is what happens when the meaning of it becomes dependent on our ability to make every other form of information within us comply. Strength is no longer our ability to choose how we respond after integrating the whole of that experience. It becomes our ability to determine which part of that experience are even allowed to have influence. And under pressure, this form of self-command can feel powerful because it restores a sense of order. We know what we are expected to do. We know which need must wait. We know which version of ourselves need to enter a room. We know what we are going to do, and the feeling of being in charge can be experienced as strength. And at the same time, superiority can also become part of this same relationship with control. When our ability to control ourselves has become the evidence of our strength, another person who does not control themselves in the same way can be judged as weaker. Someone may express an emotion that we have learned to contain, and we may experience their expression as excessive. Someone may honor a limit that we routinely override, and we may interpret that choice as a lack of care or commitment. Someone may ask for support that we would not permit ourselves to request, and we may describe them as dependent. Our assessment may feel honest to us. We may sincerely believe we are recognizing a difference in strength and discipline and maturity and capability or responsibility. And in this way, the meaning we have attached to control ourself can now move with us into how we are understanding our external world. The standard we use to control ourselves can quietly become the standard through which we now evaluate someone else. And this is where inadequacy and superiority can exist within the same person and within the same experience. We can start judging all parts of us that we must control as weak and inadequate, and then turn around and compare another person with that controlled version we have learned to present to the world. And in order to feel superior and find them lacking and inadequate. Many of us know this. Lies that have the best chance of being seen as true have some part of the truth within them. And that becomes exactly what is happening here. In both directions, something true may still be present. Control does not need to remove every fact to create a deliberate falsehood. The narrowing happens around which truths are allowed to matter, which information can influence our understanding, and whether what we learn is permitted to change the position we have already established. And this is how control can replace honesty without being the opposite of honesty. Honesty does not suddenly disappear and become all a lie. It just has to be constrained, controlled, and within the right parameters that our control is asking of us. And now, as we bring this episode to a close, I want us to hold control with the same honesty we have been exploring throughout this season. Control is learned. It may have helped us preserve belonging, maintain stability, prevent conflict, or remain functional through experiences we did not yet have another way to hold. It may have given our nervous system the predictability it needed when certainty felt too difficult to remain present with. Understanding this does not remove the impact of control when it narrows our own experience or the experience of another person. It allows us to see the pattern without turning against ourselves. Even the instruction to stop controlling can become another form of internal control. One more demand that tells our mind, our nervous system, and body what they're not allowed or permitted to do. Instead, for us to move back into conscious presence, so discernment determines our choices versus control, our work starts with recognition. It is noticing where the ability to override ourselves has become connected to our understanding of strength. This is what Rise within the SIRE model speaks of, recognition. It is noticing where we may feel superior because someone else is expressing what we have learned to contain and remain controlled with. And it is noticing when the words we call honest reflect what is factually accurate and still excluding information that has not been allowed to influence us. Now, for a few reflective considerations we can take away. Where have we learned to experience control over ourselves as evidence of strength? What do we judge in another person because we do not permit it within our own self? And when we say that we are being honest, what within us or what within another person has been allowed to make a difference in that experience? These questions, as always, simply invite us to notice whether the choices we trust have enough room for the whole experience. Honesty can begin before we know what to change or whether anything even needs to change. It can begin when we acknowledge that our thinking has reached one conclusion, while our emotions, our nervous system, our body, or our deeper consciousness continue to carry information that we have not yet considered. And it can begin when we allow another person's experience to remain real, even when it does not match our intention or the expectation that we formed. And in our next episode, we will turn towards another conditioned pattern and explore it in our own terms. When we embrace self-sabotage, we will stay with how choices that appear to work against what we want can still be what we choose, and what feels familiar, reasonable, or protective when we are under pressure. Thank you for spending this time with me on Catalyze Yourself. I'm Gayatri, your host, and I'm so grateful for the time we share here. Please feel free to share your perspectives on any of the platforms you're listening on, and please share with anyone you feel will find value in joining us on this journey. And until next time, let us keep noticing what our mind, our nervous system, and body are already communicating to ourselves, and allow that information to remain part of what we recognize and acknowledge and process as honesty.